Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of the $1 Billion Movie Club.
Welcome.
Welcome.
And if you're just joining us, why don't you give us a rundown of what we're doing here, Miss Simpson?
Hello, I'm Christian Masinson, and my co-host, as always, is...
Pawan Mehta.
And this is the show where we break down some of the most popular films of all time. We go through each film that has crossed the $1 billion worldwide box office gross mark.
That's one way to say it.
Is that a clear way of saying it? And each week we discuss the film, see if we like it, if we don't like it, why was it popular, and have some fun.
See how we can make it better, see where it ranks among the other films that have crossed that threshold.
It's really a science. To the art.
We're extremely objective about the rankings.
So thank you for coming to what I think of as like a book club, but about movies.
A movie club.
A movie
book club. $1 billion movie club.
Whoa. Whoa. Pawan, stop. I want you to write that down on a sticky note, fold it, throw it in the air like a paper airplane, and throw it at a trajectory that will go from your house to my house through the chimney that I'm going to create.
If I got
the time that you... Okay. Frick. You don't have a pen. We're gonna have to make some change. Oh, you have a pen. Can you just throw the pen at me?
Okay, so what am I writing?
Yes. So, Pawan, what film are we watching, discussing this week?
Oh, wait. First, I got to finish this up.
Whoa, for those of you listening and not watching,
I just threw a piece of paper in the air and it landed on my head.
In a very similar fashion, one may throw salt over their shoulder for good luck. Pawan tossed a crumpled up piece of paper and littered their room.
So we saw Return of the King this week.
The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, the second film to ever cross the $1 billion mark.
Pawan, released 6 years after the previous film.
Yes, just about 6 years, which we can... I was going to ask you about your personal life, but we're going to ignore that for now. I don't care at this moment. We're going to go into some of the numbers. Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, released in the year 2003, December 17th. The film had a budget of about $94 million, a domestic gross of $377 million, and would go on to gross $1.14 billion. In this article I found from Entertainment Weekly by Gary Sussman. I wonder if he still works there.
Shout out to Gary Sussman.
Thank you, Gary.
MVP.
Really, we wouldn't be here without you, Gary. This article from EW, Return of the King passes 1 billion worldwide. On Sunday, all 9 zeros on the Frodo meter rolled over. The Frodo meter? We're going to have to judge every film on the Frodo meter from now on. That's the day The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, became only the second movie ever to surpass the $1 billion in worldwide box office receipts. I said something.
Receipts?
Yes, receipts. They got the receipts.
Oh, damn.
According to distributor New Line, the film crossed the threshold on February 22nd, 2004, in the film's 10th week in release, surpassing the mark set by Titanic, which took it more than 11 weeks to crack the $1 billion ceiling. Return of the King, huge success. According to Box Office Mojo, the source for all of our numbers, it spent 4 weeks at #1 in the box office, the first film in 2 years to do it. The previous film to accomplish this, Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring. Fellowship of the Ring.
Ooh, the first one. Not even the second one was able to do that.
No. Critically beloved, it accomplished a rare feat in that it swept the Academy Awards.
It even won Best Picture.
Yes, nominated for 11 Oscars. Won all 11, tying the record with Titanic and Ben-Hur. It went on to win Best Picture, Director, Adapted Screenplay, Original Score, Original Song, Visual Effects, Art Direction, Costume Design, Makeup, Sound Mixing, and Film Editing. Quite the accomplishment. Pawan, what is your history with this film?
So,
actually, let me this film, or maybe even just a franchise, because this is the first franchise film we're tackling on this show.
Right. So I have a pretty interesting history with the Lord of the Rings franchise.
Mm-mm.
So we're going into a bit of a story time.
I love
So
stories.
buckle in for story time. All right. So like when I was a young lad, young chap, I used to go to daycare, and my brother also used to go there before me. And one day, like the head teacher or whatever gave us two movies,
All right.
one for him and one for me.
All right. As
He got
gifts?
yes, yes.
Okay.
He got a bootleg copy of Fellowship of the Ring,
All right. All right.
and I got Daddy Daycare.
But not the bootleg version, just a regular copy of Daddy Daycare.
Yeah.
Cool. Cool. Too bad we're never going to discuss Daddy Daycare. But maybe we can discuss Daddy Day Camp one of these days.
What?
There was a sequel. You don't remember this?
Listen, I stopped at care.
After that, you did not care at all.
Also, when it comes to the Fellowship of the Ring book,
Oh,
I took a speed reading class like when I was in high school one summer where we read the Fellowship of the Ring as like a group.
okay.
And by the end of the 4 weeks, we got halfway through the book.
What a failure of a speed reading class. You have one book. You can't read one book in one summer. How far in did you get?
But so the first book is split into two parts. Like when we met during the last day, we started part two.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So other than failing speed reading, you've seen all three of these films before, yes?
I have
Multiple times or just one time each?
multiple times. So after we got that bootleg copy, we bought the second and the third one from Blockbuster back when that was a thing.
Sure, sure, sure.
And I didn't watch those versions because so those were so old that they were the widescreen versions, but like for the old box TVs where it literally
Yeah.
like cut off half the
The
screen.
4:3?
Yeah. So like how they did
Yes.
widescreen is they just cut off the top and bottom.
E.
So instead I watched it on HBO Max. I have
Back then you watched on HBO Max?
No, today. But I also have the Blu-rays for the extended editions of all three movies,
I see, I see.
which basically at that point it's like a miniseries.
It felt so. I've never watched the films before, never read the books. My only history is playing Shadow of Mordor a couple years back. Very good game.
Did you play Shadow of War?
I always wanted to. I never got around to it.
Well,
If
one of the
like
characters in this movie was a pivotal side character in that game.
really, you remember? Aren't they working like on a Gollum game now? Did you read this?
I don't know.
I think
but
it's supposed to be like an open world Gollum game, and that just does not make sense in my mind. Anyways, yeah, I have no history with this franchise. I've always been meaning to watch it. Finally got around to it this week. I did one on Saturday, two on Sunday, and then did three today. And watching it, I'm just like, this is a very good, but it's so much to throw together in like one weekend.
yeah.
It's a lot. And I don't like binging TV because it's so much and so little. And it's about 9.5 hours, which is like a season of a Netflix show. And so I do think there's a world if this was made today where it could be a miniseries.
That's actually in the works.
The Amazon one,
Yes.
I thought that's supposed to be like a sequel or a spin-off of sorts.
I thought it was just a retelling that they were adding a lot of more sex to
Interesting.
because, that sells.
Does it? Let's see. In the two films we viewed this podcast, one has sex, the other doesn't. Which one made more money? I think you found a point. I think you might be right.
All right. So are we ready to get into film analysis?
We kind of just started, I feel like. started talking about how it could be a mini series of
I
sorts.
guess, yeah, yeah.
Um,
So, basic thoughts on the film.
it is quite the feat. It really, like Titanic, it's you watch it nearly 20 years removed and it's still impressive. The effects hold up, the production, the score, the it's just phenomenally well done. I
One
was a
thing I
big fan.
found interesting about this one is the last time I saw it was the extended edition. So
Okay.
seeing it this time, it felt very tight. Like even at 3.5 hours, like they fit in, they had to fit in so many plot beats that it all
Mhm.
just was like as tight as possible.
Oh, well, that's watching them for the first time. I always put them off because of the length. And I was just surprised that it never out of so we were watching it in my living room and the cable box is there, and so I was able to look at the time while watching the first two movies, so I could see the time slowly moving. So this time I took something that like blocked the time so I wouldn't look at it. It goes by so quickly. It's well paced and it's he Peter. I'm shocked because I was unaware how many how many storylines were going on. I thought it was just one storyline going through twists and turns, but it splits off into three
Oh yeah,
by the
as
time
soon
you
as
go
like the
through.
first movie is done, it's like three separate stories.
Yeah.
Well, two at least
And
at
then
the end of the
maybe
first
maybe
movie.
even like five by Return of the King. And it never feels like it's on a I never felt like it was on a storyline for too long. Like it's been too long since we've seen Pippin or Mary. It's like, oh no, oh, we're here now. Oh, hey Mary, how are you doing? Oh, you're almost dying. That's sad.
Yeah, also the like these movies are like known for being these sort of serious fantasy fare.
Mm.
I was I was honestly surprised going back to this at how many times I actually chuckled and laughed.
Oh yeah, there's a good chuckle, a good moment of relief a lot. I found
Like Gandalf was hilarious.
yes. I want to bring up one. I'm not even sure if it's an issue, but I found going into the characters, Gimli felt like he was in a different movie a lot of the time.
Yeah,
It, I he felt like a parody of himself, and I don't know why. Is it just the fact that he says a random line every three scenes and that's it?
I mean, I think the idea was like they needed someone to be comic relief in the group. So like it ended up being Gimli.
But you Jackson was able to accomplish that through typically it would be like the fish out of waterness of the hobbits being outside of the Shire. Sometimes
Yeah,
you can
but they
find
can't
little
really do
things,
that in the final movie.
I guess. But Gimli wasn't like
Oh
this
yeah, he
just the
was
front.
like
It was
that.
the
It was the
entire.
entire time. I know.
It was so off. John Rhys Davies, who I'm looking at his name right now, I just watched the Indiana Jones franchise recently. He's in those. He's terrific in those. He does a good job in here. It's just so out of place. I found. Were you gonna say something?
You know what? Go into your thing first.
I found um just comparing these to more recent blockbusters. I found that this knew what it was. Like I find that the
Compared
blockbusters
to those
um
today.
your Star Wars, your MCUs, your
I see.
DCEUs, your Fantastic Beasts. I find that in trying to be sophisticated cinema, they push away the fun and the
Right.
craziness and the fantastical elements. But this franchise, this trilogy, at least, I haven't seen the Hobbits yet. Um, was able to embrace it and have fun with it, but also take it seriously.
Yeah, it's interesting how Peter Jackson was able to like accomplish this this sort of like auteurish aesthetic for the movie.
Mm.
Like it obviously brought a lot of attention to New Zealand as a country.
Oh, yes. Is New Zealand? This is a genuine question. Is it a country or a territory?
It's a country.
It's its own country?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure. So
But
we're gonna cut that last. No, no.
no, it's staying.
Wait, I'm in charge of editing it, and I'm still gonna keep it in.
Yes.
Wow, future me, curse you.
But it's also interesting how like there were certain shots where it was like extreme Dutch angles or like weird close-ups, like movement and then going over. It's the sort of thing you would never see today because it could come across as clumsy really easily.
Yes.
But like it works here.
Well, are you familiar with part of the story of how Peter Jackson got basically commissioned to do this?
Not really.
Roughly. And I hope I'm correct. I hope I'm remembering this correctly, but he was basically pitching around to studios and he came to New Line and he had such a clear vision for this franchise that they were like, here, we're this tiny company, but we're going to give you nearly $300 million to make these films. This is what I meant to ask you a little bit about Peter Jackson. Are you familiar with his filmography outside of the Lord of the Rings franchise?
I saw King Kong in theaters.
King Kong the movie? Peter Jackson's King Kong the movie?
Yeah.
You ever played Peter Jackson's King Kong the movie, the game?
You know, it's one of those that I actually want to pick up.
I always wanted to play it too. It's supposed to not be half bad. And an easy achievements for those Xbox fans out there.
And easy trophies for those PlayStation fans.
I don't know. I don't think it had trophies on the PS3 release. Actually, I'm not
didn't.
even sure if it had it. Did it have a PS3 release?
It definitely did.
Okay. But it didn't have trophies. I think that was before trophies came out.
Right. It might have been like almost a launch title for that.
Yeah. But yeah, Peter Jackson, obviously, this made him the giant name in cinema that he is.
Right.
Previously, he none of his films were too gigantic. He has Meet the Feebles, which is like a kind of a dark Jim Henson Muppetsy movie. Heavenly Creatures. Have you heard of this film?
That's one of those YA movies. That was like in the early 2010s, right?
No, Heavenly Creatures is a according to Wikipedia.
Okay, then I'm thinking of something else.
Zealand. Are you looking for? Is it Beautiful Creatures, the vampire zombie? The Heavenly Creatures, 94. He was nominated for an Oscar for screenplay for that. And then he had a couple other stuff, but nothing gigantic. Even post Lord of the Rings, he has King Kong, Lovely Bones.
He was also gonna direct the second Tintin movie, but that never happened.
Spielberg did the first one, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, he kind of has the ability to just do whatever he wants now. Because
everyone involved in this movie has that ability.
Yeah.
Especially Elijah Wood.
Oh yeah. And that's not an insulting yeah. But like one of the shows I always wanted to watch was Wilfred, where it's like Elijah Wood and his neighbor's dog is a human, but only he sees it as a human.
Right.
But going back to the film, yeah, I was watching these with my cousin, and he's 13. He views movies like a typical 13-year-old would, and every now and then he'd be like, "Wow, where did they shoot this movie?" Because it just they captured the settings and the landscape so wonderfully.
Right. It was genuinely a love letter to New Zealand in just the scope and cinematography of it all. But another thing as to why he probably was given so much money for it is because this was considered one of those unfilmable books for a long time.
Was it?
Because it came out in like the early 20th century.
Yes, 21st. Wait, the book or the films?
The book.
Okay.
And like it was really popular even at the time, but like obviously the technology and everything wasn't there and no one had the vision for it. And the thing is, the way the book is written, there's so much lore and backstory for everything.
Mm.
Like you go to a location and you know and you learn of what's happened there, like before all this happened, like with the ring and all that.
May I interject two things?
Sure.
One, you said the early 20th century. Fellowship of the Ring came out July 29th, 1954.
Okay, mid 20th century.
Just wanted to do a little fact check. Two, um, yeah, is that kind of why he was able to do such extended director's cut? Because he had so much source material to pull from, basically?
Right, but it was also like it's also putting that into a script context
Mm-mm.
because you can't just give an info dump like that through a narrator. That's not what he was going for with these movies. But I also think he handled it really well. Like there are moments where you could tell when they're entering a new location where they do have a bit of info dump, but it's like 2 or 3 sentences. But it really fleshes out the world still.
Sure, sure. I did have the Game of Thrones effect in that at times it felt like they were introducing so much lore that I didn't know the names, but I could put faces to face and understand what was going on.
Right.
Um, Pawan, can you give a little quick summary of what happens in this film?
So at the start of this movie, the Battle of Helm's Deep had just finished, right? And Gandalf and the gang had forced back the orcs. And the first scene is actually a flashback to Smeagol encountering the ring for the first time and getting a reintroduction to the stakes of why this ring needs to be gone, along with learning just how bad Smeagol has been this entire time.
Can we pause your synopsis for a second
Sure,
and just
sure,
talk
sure.
about Gollum and Smeagol?
Oh, of course. Of course.
Arguably the most iconic characters of the franchise, I think.
I mean, it definitely made Andy Serkis's career.
Yes, which I want to bring up Andy Serkis, a name we'll be mentioning multiple times throughout the history of this podcast. He shows up in a number of films later on. I didn't realize they're barely in Fellowship of the Ring.
Wait, so it's been a minute since I've seen this. I thought that he showed up in Two Towers.
So yeah, but in Fellowship of the Ring, they show like Gollum's eyes briefly.
Ah, okay.
But I was in the similar way that I forget that Yoda is not in A New Hope. The character becomes so synonymous with the franchise. It's crazy to think there was a time where they just weren't introduced to the mainstream audience. You know, the books they were in, but there's a whole year where people just didn't know about Gollum.
Right. They
and
didn't
cer-
know what was to come.
No, I was always kind of whenever I saw his spine, that's what always got me. I don't know why that's what always gets me. But Circus, phenomenal job.
Yeah,
don't know,
definitely.
I don't know
Like
if I
at some
predicted that.
points you he just isn't human.
No. And
Like
and this was a mocap performance, right?
yes.
For the most part, I'm assuming.
I think this was like one of the first big mocap performances.
Yeah. I like the movie opens and it's the two of them on like a boat fishing. And I see a guy, I'm like, oh, they gave Andy Serkis a human cameo as well. That's so nice of them to do that for Andy Serkis. And then it's a reveal that he's Smeagol. I'm like, oh, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So yes, we got a little more of Gollum's backstory in this. What else happens in this film?
And then does it cut to Frodo after that? I actually forgot.
Oh,
Well, I'll just explain the multiple
Yeah.
plots. So Frodo is mid quest to go to this mountain that he's been doing for quite a while, about 6 hours at this point. And he's reached like the outer area of the orcs main base, and he's just chilling with Sam and Smeagol. And Smeagol out here lying and fostering quite a beef between Frodo and Sam.
This Smeagol, very sus.
Very
Very
sus.
sus. I'm gonna be honest, watching this storyline, and all the deception, I genuinely was thinking of the hit video game Among Us. In those moments where there's only three of you, and then one of them's the killer, and you don't know who to trust. Frodo, no clue who to trust.
And like the fact that that dynamic just came across so well.
Which dynamic specifically, the trio or
The trio.
yes.
Like you could tell all of their motivations made sense. Like Sam obviously is there for Frodo, but also Frodo knows that everyone gets tempted by the ring.
Mm-hmm.
So he's sus of Sam.
Mm-hmm.
And then Smeagol out here throwing more blame onto Sam, so makes it even worse. So the other plot is Gandalf and the rest of the crew. They find Merry and Pippin at the tower for Saruman the Grey, right?
I think that might have been end of Two Towers. Is that this one?
They meet them there at the beginning of this one.
Sure.
They don't show that guy dying in this version, but he's there.
Which I didn't. You've mentioned this multiple times to me out of this podcast that there's a character that's prominent in two movies and then is killed off screen, and you don't see it in the third one. And I completely forgot until I was looking back at Wikipedia, acquainting names with faces again. But like, yeah, they just left Christopher Lee to dry out in the. Is that the metaphor?
Yeah,
Cool.
Yeah, that works.
Cool.
So then we hang out with the trees for a little bit, and we get a little orb.
Yes.
And then they bring it back to Helm's Deep, and then Pippin's just a little too curious.
Oh, just a little, just a tiny bit,
Just a tad.
just a tad, odd.
So
Tad.
Sauron knows where they are. So Gandalf had to take Pippin out of there, and they head towards Minas Tirith, I think it was called.
Mischief Managed. Is that the name? Minish Cap? Is it not a Legend of Zelda game made by Capcom? I'm going really in on the video
Minas
game
Tirith.
references.
There we go. Yep, Minas Tirith. Which, again, also beautiful miniature work with that entire town.
Whoa, that didn't even occur to me till right now. Oh, movies, the magic of cinema.
Yeah, like they made the entire town just like one big city along a rock face.
Mm-hmm.
And it just goes upward and upward. Something that definitely isn't naturally occurring in the real world. And like it would take a lot more than 90 mil to actually build.
You
But
have
the
not
way-
seen my side of Jersey City. It's crazy. It's crazy here.
It's not that vertical. But yeah, the minute another thing is a lot of the CG and practical effects merged really well.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that's kind of dated is a bit of the green screen. But like other than that, everything's just so seamless.
And that kind of only occurs like during the close-ups during the fighting sequences mainly, right?
It was mostly during the close-ups when they were just talking. Like at the top of the town when Gandalf was talking to Pippin.
Yeah, you're right. I only noticed them during fight scenes, but no, you're right. You're correct. You've seen the movie more than once.
So Pippin and Gandalf head there first, and they talk to Boromir's dad, who has gone crazy with power.
Mm-hmm. As one does. It's a recurring theme in this franchise.
One can say things. All right. So the rest of the gang uh, comes in with the rest of the people from Helm's Deep, and they realize they're low on soldiers. So Aragorn is like, "Yo, I'm BRB." The night before they leave to help with the fight, and he goes get some ghosts.
As you do, as one does in a fantasy realm.
Yeah, just grab them, just
Yeah.
catch them, and then we'll come back to that. Would you like to explain some of the plot?
Let's see how much I remember. So we go back to, I don't know which one happens next. They all combine into one. Frodo and Samwise, they get into some drama. Gollum causes a rift between the two. And so Samwise is Frodo's like, no, Samwise, you go back to the Shire. Is it the Shire? That's the name, right?
Yes.
And he's like, you go back to the Shire. And Gollum's like, yes, yes, yes. And so Frodo and Gollum go into this cave with this giant spider. Gollum's trying to
Shelob.
kill Shelob. Is that the name of the?
Yes.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, yes, yes, yes.
Are you recognizing something now? That's the character from Shadow of War.
I didn't play Shadow of War.
Yeah, but that's the one I brought up earlier.
I see.
In that one, they actually made her a woman, like a human woman with big breasts, because of course they did.
I'm more confused how the spider becomes a woman.
You know, they magic it. I
Okay.
didn't play the game, but I just know that that's a thing. Which is like,
Huh.
why did you have to make the giant spider into like a mommy figure?
Spiders lay eggs.
Yeah, but like,
No, you're right. You're right.
you know, you rarely see
This
women characters who are not like extremely feminine or like presenting as feminine like that. Like in this one, she's just straight up a spider, and that's just how it is.
when I have so many questions about the character, we can move on from this, right?
Yep.
So Frodo realizes Gollum's mean. It's like, no.
And then pushes him off a cliff.
Long story short, Frodo throws the ring into lava.
Yeah, that's a bit later though.
I was trying to streamline this.
Yeah, that's fair.
Throws into lava. And
the other guys fight at Minas Tirith, and then they finish that, and they're like, "We gotta help Frodo, like grab attention away from him, so that he can go to the mountain."
The giant eye in the sky.
Yeah,
the literal giant eye in the sky. And so there was a giant battle. This eye was focusing on the battle, but not the intimate battle for the ring between Frodo and Gollum. Gollum bites Frodo's fingers off.
And then falls down to his death in the volcano.
Yes. Along with the ring. Thus saving Middle-earth.
Yes.
I think that's a fine way to wrap up the synopsis. Yes.
And then there's another like 20 minutes of wrap up, because this is the final film of 3. It's not only concluding itself, it's concluding 2 other films.
I will say, maybe it's because I was expecting the never-ending ending. It didn't bother me.
It is definitely longer in the extended cut.
I can only assume. I think why one might be annoyed is because Jackson decides to completely fade to black or fade to white at the end of each scene, thus giving this feeling of ending. And then it's like, nope, there's more. It's like, oh,
I can see that.
I enjoyed the ending very much. We were discussing earlier Gimli kind of getting thrown into the comedic corner.
So going off of that, so this is like a benchmark for fantasy, right?
Films, yes,
and books.
Okay,
because Dungeons and Dragons was also, I think we could agree, heavily based off of this movie. I mean, this book.
Yes, because that'd be like 20, 30 years after, right?
Yeah. The one thing I don't like about fantasy movies at this point, like fantasy stories, like the tropes of it, is that a lot of them seem to grab them from this movie without taking any of the nuance.
May I ask what recent fantasy stories are there? And a genuine question in this way, other than Game of Thrones.
Well, I'm thinking of it more from the terms of D&D, because like in that you have the races as well, and like there are races that are inherently evil, like orcs.
Okay.
And like the idea that they are inherently evil and stuff like that, and that elves are racist, and that there's that feud between elves and dwarves.
Does this, and this is a genuine question that I don't know the answer to. I don't know if you're ready for this conversation. Is this a reflection of the 50s?
I mean, the thing is, in Lord of the Rings, it works to like flesh out the world a little bit because it is presenting it as these people are racist, but it's not something that's good or just the way it is. Like
I
it's something the characters need to actually get over. Like one of my favorite scenes in this movie, and like the sort of scene where if I was you, I would be crying, is
I'm hurt by that statement.
is when Gimli says, I never thought I'd die fighting side by side with an elf. And then Legolas is like, well, how about side by side with a friend?
I'd like it to be noted that I did not cry in this moment. I was filled with warmth and cheer and joy,
You
but
can
not
cry from
crying.
joy.
I was not crying.
You
How
can cry
dare
from
you?
joy.
How dare you accuse me of crying at a point in this film that I did not cry? I cried at other
Okay, no,
moments
no,
of
no.
this.
I didn't say you cried. I said if I was you.
My
Different thing.
name is being dragged through the mud, and I will not have it.
Cool.
I don't know much about comparing it to D&D, just because my knowledge of D&D is just that, you kind of make it up on the spot, and you got to have some sort of set rules that you can play with, right?
Well, that's just tabletop gaming itself.
But I don't know if you can use that as a critique of the fantasy genre,
No. I'm talking specifically about the D&D books.
like one that you would read.
They're handbooks in terms of like helping you build the character and
Yeah.
build the world.
Yes, but again, don't you need this somehow turned into a D&D conversation. Don't you need the restrictions so that you can then figure out how to connect those dots?
Yeah, but like the idea that a race is inherently evil is just a little restrictive.
Yes, but it plays into something that I think is why, if we look at this film and later films that we will discuss in this podcast, they became so successful. Is that because people want to identify with the hero and have that moment of being held up in heroicism. I think, this film came out 2003, and is about uniting against a common enemy.
I can see that. Thoughts on Legolas? Because he was a big heartthrob.
Legolas, played by Orlando Bloom, another actor we'll see a couple times in the upcoming months, maybe next week. He's there. He was cool. So first two movies, I'm like, okay, he's cool. He has a bow and arrow. Yeah. And then this movie has that sequence where he takes down the elephant and everyone on it. I'm like, okay, I get why people love Legolas.
I mean, like a lot of people, said at that point he became a little too OP, but that's going into a different kind of conversation.
It's again, it's fantasy. It's you want the hero to win at the end.
But like poor Gimli, man.
That only counted as one. It's okay. It only counted as one. Again, Gimli not giving respect from Peter Jackson. Peter, where is the Gimli spinoff?
Well, just wait till we get to the Hobbit. There's
What
12
does that
dwarfs in
mean?
that one.
But hold up. Now you're saying all dwarves are the same? Hold up.
No, I'm just saying.
Really? Really? They're
All
not a
right.
dwarf. They're my friend. Can we say dwarf? Is that? I
See,
feel like
that's
that might be
another
offensive
thing.
now. I feel like that's offensive now. Did that? I feel weird that I said it like 18 times in this podcast now. I apologize.
Another moment where I was in the feels was at the end when Aragorn had assumed his rightful place as the king, and all the hobbits were out in front kneeling. And he's like, "My friends, you kneel to no one." That got
Wait,
me.
you were okay. Wow,
That got me. I mean, I didn't cry, but that got me.
that didn't get me oddly. But it is a very well done moment. Because that's basically the goodbye scene to Aragon, Gimli, Legolas, right?
Was that before or after the bed scene?
That's after, because the bed scene is right when is the first one after.
Right after they
Frodo
come back
wakes
from
up.
the mountain. Yeah.
Yeah, because you can't get the goodbye to Aragon. Don't get really anything for Legolas or Gimli.
Again, those are things that were cut for time.
And then this is when we bring up the two elements that so I'm watching this film, right, as a first time viewer. My biggest the biggest film franchise I'd say I'm connected to is Harry Potter. And that's a little iffy right now as a fan. So I'm like, can this be my replacement to Harry Potter? It has a lot of fun stuff. The reluctant hero, the friend who's by his side. It's missing the female character who is better than everyone else. And I watched Fellowship of the Ring. I'm like, okay, I think Kate Blanchett's the only woman in this movie. That's not a good sign. And then Liv Tyler's in that one as Arwen.
Yeah, she's always in the background.
Yeah, always in the background. And the only storyline is her relationship with Aragorn. And then you get how do you say the other Elwyn?
Yeah, Eowyn.
Elwyn, whose two storylines are, hey, I'm a woman, but that shouldn't restrict me from fighting.
Wait, whoa, no. That's not her.
Oh, I don't know names.
Is
Which
it?
character
Wait.
is this? It is her.
Yep, that's her. Wow, I got them mixed up. Cool.
That's fine. Anyways, her two storylines are, hey, I'm a woman, but I could fight. And, hey, Viggo Mortensen, I'm in love with you. And he's like, I'm not. And that's it.
But even the way he said it was very poetic. That's another thing. The script is so... I love the way the script is written.
But you could be poetic and an asshole.
Yeah.
I just found that none of the female characters really got any credit. Except,
I mean, she killed the one person who was unable to be killed by any man.
And it's that thing of like, I feel like I can't fully speak to this. I'm not a woman, but I it's like the scene at Avengers Endgame when all the women come out, and it feels a little fan servicey, but also I feel like I could understand someone watching that and being inspired. So I don't know how I feel about it.
I don't know. I feel like this one was a lot more. It was a lot better set up than like the Avengers.
Yes, I will agree with that. But maybe it's just because I was so disappointed that her two storylines are, hey, I'm in love with Aragorn, and hey, I'm a woman, but I should be equal, which isn't a bad storyline inherently, but it felt like both the women in this were missing something.
Well, if you want to talk about like that, we could also bring up the fact that like no one who isn't white is in this film.
Oh, you don't think I wanted to bring that up? Hey, Tolkien. Tolkien's dead, right?
Yeah.
Tolkien, I'm going to speak straight to your grave. All right. I hope you hear me. How is it that you could imagine orcs, dragons, flying eagles that could carry you from spot to spot, but you can't imagine people with colored skin?
Well, see, the thing is, I don't think in the books they bring up the color of the skin
Yes.
at any
Should
point.
I rephrase it to be at Peter Jackson?
Yeah, because I don't think that's a Tolkien problem. But
Okay.
it's also a thing where like I'm pretty sure New Zealand as a country is pretty homogenous in its population.
I don't know. Is it? That sounds like something that could be true. I know Taika Waititi's from New Zealand. That is all I got. I don't know anything about New Zealand. I apologize to New Zealand if you're listening to this. New Zealanders, you're very wonderful.
Yeah,
Sounds like everything's good.
70% European with the indigenous Maori, which I'm probably mispronouncing as 16.5%.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing, Pawan. How many of these actors are from New Zealand? If you could fly in Elijah Wood, Andy Serkis, Ian McKellen from like America, Britain, you'd fly in other actors, can you not? Can you not?
This is another conversation we're going to save for later when we talk about The Hobbit.
What does that mean? Oh, I am not excited for that episode now. Oh my goodness. Okay. But it's always important to note that. Ian McKellen, treasure. Yes.
Yes.
International treasure. We can't say national, he's not ours, but international treasure, yes. Wonderful as Gandalf. Nominated for an Oscar in Fellowship of the Ring. I think it's deserved. He's a wizard, right?
Yes.
So where are his powers?
What are you talking about?
I swear he doesn't use his magic at all after that fight with Saruman in the first one.
No, when they were coming back from the outside village in this movie, and like he was running on Shadowfax, which by the way, best horse. Shadowfax, best horse.
That's with him and Pippin, right? When he's taking Pippin out of the early on. Am I wrong?
No, I'm talking about when they've already made it to Minas Tirith and he's going to help protect the other people.
Okay.
And like all the flying, I forget their names, but like the flying beasts, he pushes them back with the light from his staff.
Okay. Again, that's one instance. I saw this man fighting with a bow staff, with his staff like a bow staff, like he was a Ninja Turtle. All right. You have powers. I saw you pick up Christopher Lee and throw him against the wall with your hand. How are you not using those in the fights?
Well, I mean, I could come up with a bunch of reasons. But like,
just a thought I had.
We're not turning this into a podcast where it's like, who would win in a fight?
It's just a thought I have. Like, you have all these magical powers, and I feel like I never saw you use it.
But now that you bring it up, who would win in a fight? Gandalf the White or Goku?
Wow. Okay. Well, Goku shoots laser beams. Gandalf has a bow staff. It's a tough call. Really is a tough call. I'm going to have to give it to Goku just because he also flies without an eagle.
That's another thing when you think about this story in terms of peril, because like there's a lot of points where they just like sideline Gandalf because that would take away any like
It does. Yeah.
uh take away any of the peril and like possibility of failure.
Yes, it does. Um, looking at my notes here. One of the things I loved about this film in particular is that I feel like it finally gave a moment to let Mary and Pippin be their own characters.
Right.
Because I could not tell the two of them apart at all by the end of Two Towers. And you have a better sense of who they are as characters by themselves, and they have their own heroic moments. I found that a wonderful touch. Both Billy Boyd, who played Pippin, and Dominic Monaghan, who played Mary. Wonderful in the roles.
Since you bring that up, my favorite musical moment in a movie so far, Pippin.
Yes. I did want to bring up that scene.
Yeah, it's better than any of the songs in La La Land.
Hold up. Hold up. Where did that come from? Where did that come from?
This is similar to that scene where what's her name?
Emma Stone or Mia?
Emma Stone is in the audition thing.
Now
they're both singing for
which is the only relation.
For people who don't care.
They cast Mia in the film after that.
Yeah, but they care afterwards.
I don't.
I mean, I mainly just brought this up to piss you off.
Which is what bothers me. I was going to go start talking about how I love that scene, and you just have to attack this film I love. And I don't even love the scene. That scene itself in La La Land, for some reason, never clicks for me, even though I love the song. I think she does a wonderful performance. I like the choices Chazelle makes, but as a whole, it doesn't click with me. But it just is such a random way to stab me. All right. Out of nowhere. And that's what's angering me. All right. You're my friend. I trusted you. All right. And you said,
I just ate some grapes in front of you.
You talk about the scene. I need a second to recompose.
Well, it's juxtaposed with that guy's second son, who isn't dead, being sent off to his death. And he's just out there. He's just up in his tower eating some fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
Mostly fruits.
I was shocked because I believe the scene's about halfway through the film. And it starts with Pippin being demanded to sing a song. And he starts and he sings a cappella. And I believe Jackson cuts to these shots establishing the army about to go into war. And as he sings, slowly you hear the strings come in. It's intercut between Pippin singing, both sides of the battle charging, and the king man. I don't know what's his name. What is his name? Do we know his name?
Give me 1 sec.
Faramir? No. Denethor eating the fruits and vegetables on his plate. And then slowly it builds. I believe an orchestration is added as Pippin continues singing, and the battlings happen. They don't even actually show the battle, which boggled my mind. It cuts to Denethor biting into like a tomato, and then the juices coming out, and that's it.
Yeah, that's what makes that scene so haunting, actually.
Yeah, but it's so much restraint in that moment, which I would never expected in the big climactic film of a franchise. And it's brilliantly cut together, and that's the first time I started tearing up during this movie, and I was not expecting that.
Makes sense, yeah. And like also the most epic death was also Denethor.
Was it? Ugh.
I think that was the best in terms of like you just see him running on fire off the edge.
Yes.
That was pretty dope.
Yes. I think I was just kind of mad at the character, but no, you're right. It's a fun death for him to run off. And he does find out his son is still alive.
Yeah. That's
which is
what
interesting.
causes him to like realize his folly. And
Um,
he literally falls from grace.
I have an odd request. I have to run to the bathroom. So can you vamp and entertain the audiences?
Can we just edit this part out?
We will, but if you can have a fun vamp, then I would like to keep that in. So we're gonna see how good you are at vamping for a quick second, and I'll come back. And then when I edit this, we'll see if I keep this in or not. Thank you.
Well, an idea that I'd like to come back to is the poetry of this film. It was it's not the type of dialogue you'd naturally see in a movie of this scale. It's very stylized, very well, not a movie of this scale, more like movies that traditionally get nominated for Best Picture and the like, because this is very much a genre movie. Yep. I'm just gonna hang out here till Simpson comes back. We're gonna pick that topic up again once he comes back. Let's just chill. Just relax. Stay calm. We're all riding down the train of life. That is what's happening. We don't know where we're going. We don't know what came before, but we're on it. We're enjoying this little ride.
What did you do?
Great question.
So you're just thinking to leave the? Yeah, I'll find out later. Going back into our conversation, we kind of focused on about a lot of the supporting characters. I feel like we ignored the major characters of this trilogy. Aragorn, Frodo, and Sam.
You know, funny thing, in the book, Aragorn doesn't actually show up till part 2 of
the first one,
of the first book.
It takes a while for him to show up in Fellowship, doesn't he?
Yeah, it takes a minute.
Kind of going into what I expected and what I found, I was shocked that by the time you get to Two Towers, it turns into an ensemble film. I think that first one was very much from Frodo's standpoint, and then 2 and 3 are split in such ways that there's no real main character. It's just so much is going on. But Viggo Mortensen's Aragorn, Sean Astin, I think he had to say his last names, his Samwise, and Elijah Wood's Frodo, all terrific anchors in each storyline, I think.
Another thing that's there in this trilogy that was really rare at the time is just showing this like friendship that didn't feel the need to be like no homo about it.
What are you comparing it to? Because I generally don't know what.
I'm talking about it in terms of the fact that
I understand you're talking about Frodo and Samwise, right?
Yeah. After its release on DVD and stuff, after a couple years, TBS ran it and then had like promotional ads where they were like Sam and Frodo are gay, and like that was the joke in their ads for their showing of the movie.
Gross. That's gross. 2003.
Well, it was obviously later than that.
2003.5.
Like mid to late 2000s, because you know that was all the rage back then.
Well, that's just a different conversation to have. It's that weird thing of The Hangover becomes the highest grossing R-rated film at the time and is filled with homophobia because that was quote unquote funny at the time.
Right.
Just the way comedy ages and that weird era of now we're talking about these topics it in itself is funny because it's random and we'd never talked about it before. It's ooh, a messy time.
But yeah, the fact that I honestly feel like they've developed the friendships a lot deeper than the romances.
Well, yeah, because the women are barely in the film, but no, you're completely right. Um, well, in 2 and 3, basically Frodo and Samwise are together for about the entire thing. 3, it's just them and Gollum, because at least they have the one son in 2 that like captures them, but it's just them, Gollum, and a spider in Return of the King.
Shelob.
I don't think they mentioned the name in the film. Gollum says she, but I don't remember the second syllable that you're saying.
You might be right.
So
You might be right about that.
exactly.
Going
But
back to the world building for a second, a great example of that for me was the whole moment where Pippin was like lighting the torch for like the other nations to see.
Mhm.
I don't know. For me, that also, it was just like this little moment that could have been skipped, but it helped flesh out the world even more.
Could it have been skipped? Because it's referenced when Aragorn comes in and tells that they need help.
I mean, that was given from the top of the movie where they were talking about going to help them.
But that's when they know, hey, we gotta leave now.
Hmm.
I think that is necessary, so that it took them 2 days to travel there. They need to know when. Um, on the topic of Aragorn, Viggo Mortensen is a freaking badass. Very good in these films. Um,
The only other thing I've seen him in is a history of violence, I think.
oh, okay.
What else has he done?
I'm familiar with him. Well, I became a fan of him when I saw Captain Fantastic. Are you familiar with this film?
Nope.
Written and directed by the dude who plays Gavin Ross in Silicon Valley. It
Hmm.
is a dramedy ish, actually more drama than a comedy. He and his wife are kind of hippie-ish, kind of out there. They live in the forest with like their 5, 6 kids, and the wife dies, and so her parents want to give her a funeral, and so there's this clash between their two cultures, and Viggo has to learn how to take care
I
of his
see.
kids better. Fantastic film. And then recently he was in Green Book, which
Oh, yeah.
very problematic. I think his performance is solid, but so much of that film is just, um, yeah, yeah.
Regarding this film, I did want to get back to the topic of the dialogue itself
Sure, go on.
because it is definitely written in a very stylized manner. Like it is high fantasy writing.
Mm-mm.
And I'm surprised that he, Peter Jackson also wrote the screenplay, right?
Peter Jackson wrote the screenplay along with, looking for the names, screenplay by Fran Walsh, Philippa Boyens, and Peter Jackson.
How they were able to like explain this also goes to the actors, how they were able to like portray the emotions so clearly behind this dense dialogue.
Dense as in just so much to say, so wordy.
Yeah.
Um, Well, going into that topic, I found the dialogue to feel, and typically this happens in fantasy, it feels medieval. It feels almost of the Renaissance, Shakespearean. And so I think that's why you can get an actor like Ian McKellen or Kate Blanchett to do this almost Shakespearean dialogue and bring such wonderful life to it.
Yeah, it did have that sort of Shakespearean level of poetry to it, which is also something you won't really find very often in these billion-dollar movies.
But a lot of the billion-dollar movies are set in modern day. Why would they do such a thing?
I mean, there's still a stylization.
Sure, but that's they're not going for this kind of uh, ancient aesthetic.
Right.
You know, they're going for the quippy, quick, modern day type thing. But going on that, maybe that's why Gimli's out of place. His dialogue's always like 6 words, and none of them are ever. But thou shalt, with on the day in which this happened, you know.
Oh yeah, I just remembered another really funny moment that I wanted to highlight.
Hmm.
The moment where the Merry, Pippin, Gandalf, Legolas, Gimli, and everyone else were like charging towards battle, but like Merry and Pippin were the first ones to start running, and they like the wide shot shows that they're clearly ahead of everyone, and then they get overtaken.
I didn't notice that. That's funny. One thing I wanted to bring up was the it's always weird when movies are like, hey, kindness and happiness and friendship solves all of our problems. And yet, in this day and age, I think that message is more necessary than ever before.
Yeah, like it's easy to be cynical for stories like that. But I feel like at this point I love them just like usually as is. Like I very much enjoyed My Little Pony Friendship is Magic.
Very much so. Very much so. Have I been forced to watch an episode or two? Perhaps.
And like it's not really a thing you see in movies or like TV shows made for adults these days.
Not action oriented films. Because I have found recently a film we'll discuss later, Last Jedi, which I guess not what I was going for, but that is about how love Rose has that thing about like love and friendship will overcome hate. But I found recently we had films like A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, Knives Out, Jojo Rabbit are about like the power of love and compassion and empathy. And I remember watching Last Jedi and thinking, oh, that's stupid. And then I watched those films. I'm like, no, you're right. Those are important things to remind people about nowadays because it's been forgotten and left behind. And so when they say they've conquered the evil through their friendship and stayed friends with their love, it's like, yes, they did, and that's great. That's incredible. The bond between Frodo and Samwise we briefly discussed, but the moment in the film that really got me was when Frodo's hanging off that ledge and Samwise comes and he's like, hey, grab my hand. And something about the way the music swells and builds there and the look in both their eyes, it moved me in such a way that the rest of this franchise has not at that moment.
Well, I mean, that's also the ultimate climax of the series. Because that's like right after the ring gets placed in the fire.
Yes, but it's also a much more intimate moment compared to what we get in the films.
Yeah, but I don't know if see that's another thing this franchise, well, at least with these three, they were able to understand greatly is that emotional investment isn't necessarily tied to the scale of the events.
Sorry, it sounded like you had more to say after that.
No.
But yeah, I loved what Elijah Wood and Sean Astin brought to this film. Specifically, Sean Astin, I think he really shined in this as he's trying to fight against Gollum and trying to convince his friend, but there's so much pain in him when he's unable to convince Frodo, and then he has these kind of soft puppy doggy eye moments. Especially
like if you just look at the plot for their interaction, it's really simple.
Yeah.
But it's all based on the actors. And they sell it so well.
Wonderful job. Elijah Wood specifically, I want to I say condemn. That's not the word. Um, praise because watching this franchise after I've seen Star Wars, I've seen Harry Potter, I've seen et cetera, you start seeing the similar tropes they bring up, right?
Right.
And Frodo is the reluctant hero as much as Harry or Luke. But I never found him to be whiny and annoying, which specifically with Luke Skywalker I find, and I don't really love about Luke. But
See, that's the thing most people don't get about Luke Skywalker, especially when it came to people hating on The Last Jedi, which we'll talk
oh,
about
we'll talk
later.
about this in like 10 months, thankfully. We don't have to bother with that now. But yeah, Elijah Wood, there's a pureness to him. And you see it in his eyes, and you see it on his face.
I mean, that's why he was able to hold the ring.
Yes. Well, hold on. He typically had it around his neck. He wasn't holding it. He's like resting on him.
That counts.
Fine. But yeah, Elijah Wood is phenomenal in these films in such a usually nuisance of a role. He avoids the worst parts of that that character and does something great in it, I found.
Yeah, it's rare to have a character who's like so pure, but also like it feels genuine.
And part of what was one of the great parts of this film, and I guess Tolkien is the one who will thank for this since he wrote it, is that he does succumb to the ring at the end. And it
Right.
takes his friend and the love and the compassion and the support from his friend to pull him out of it. But you know, no one's immune to being corrupted by power, and it's such a strong lane that you need to have the outside support to hold you and keep you grounded and pull you back when you go too far in the deep end. And it's such a wonderful relationship that I've you know, so much of this film has been memed on the internet since then. But I maybe I'm just missing all the Samwise Frodo content.
Yeah, I mean, of the memes that I've seen of films, I feel like this is the one that earns it the most.
In regards to
Just like the moments themselves being so strong.
yes. Oh, the you shall not pass moment deserves all the recognition it gets. My goodness. My goodness.
And also just like all the quotables, like even from the first movie where like Gandalf is like holding onto the edge where he just says, "Fly, you fools."
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Ooh. Uh, the fight sequences are
Oh,
it's crazy we haven't touched that yet.
right. Just so large scale that there's no way it was all humans. But like,
I read that they developed a system that like kind of randomly generates
yeah,
the CGI characters, but then they could like zoom into each specific person that's been created and figure out what they're doing. It's astonishing to hear that.
because it also, when you just watch it as a movie, it feels so real.
Mhm. Well, one of the things I loved about this series is that the orcs aren't CGI creations for the most part.
Right.
Like they built and created the eyes and the ears and then everything with their faces and put on the makeup on all these people. And so when you get the close-ups of them invading the cities, you feel the footsteps, you feel the clubs hitting the walls and then breaking it down. And that tactile feel is something that I find is lost in the more recent blockbusters. And because
Right.
you feel from the sounds to the makeup to everything, it adds an element of fear, a very base level. Not that it becomes
Right,
a
because
horror
it
movie,
grounds
but
you in the moment itself rather than pushing you away.
yeah. And so because they're fighting these real creatures, not giant bugs in Justice League or faceless aliens in Avengers and Suicide Squad. Are they alien Suicide Squad? I don't even know what the heck they are.
They're voodoo.
They're voodoo. Anyways, yeah, you I fucking hate Suicide Squad. You feel it.
Yeah.
And that's why I think a lot of these movies do so well, is because you're put into this experience. And so even if later on we'll find movies that don't hold up as well as films cinematically, that experience is still there. And
Right.
you're buckled up in your seat, ready for every single thing to happen.
Another thing we should note is that at this point, we've talked about movies that have been the rare exceptions to make $1 billion in their time rather than something to be expected.
Sure.
So these are lightning in a bottle sort of films that they really had to be the best possible versions of themselves.
Yeah. And I think when just looking at the box office, it's I guess you kind of brought that up. I apologize for kind of double down on this, but it was number one for 4 weeks straight.
Like it's been 6 years since the previous one
hit $1 billion.
Yeah.
It Return of the King is the second highest grossing movie of the decade, from the year 2000 to 2009 or 2001 to 2000. Actually, I think it is 2000 to 2009. It's weird how one may conceive a decade. But no, even if you did 2001 to 2010.
Wait, when did Avatar come out?
2009.
Oh, so yeah, that would be the second.
So when this film finished its run, it was the second highest grossing film of all time. Avatar pushed it into number 3, and it stayed at number 3 until Deathly Hallows Part 2, which is another 2 years from that. So this movie really stood up and stood high until the $1 billion mark just got demolished more often. Currently, it stands at the number 45th highest grossing film of all time. No, that's domestic. I apologize. That's not what I'm looking for. 45th highest grossing domestic. Worldwide, it stands at 24, the 24th highest grossing film of all time, which is astounding. One of the crazy things about this franchise is that it really did just grow with each film.
Yeah.
You know, it swept the Oscars in its final year. Each consecutive film made more and more money. Like, it grew in a way that franchises don't anymore. I think nowadays franchises might start off high, then go low, and then come back up again and kind of zigzag.
Well, I think it also stems from the fact that there was a definite end goal in sight with these, because they were filmed at the same time and they came out in year after year.
Yeah.
So it was just right then. Whereas now franchises, they make one and they're like, oh, we're planning on making 90 more.
Occasionally you get a back-to-back. Pirates 2 and 3 were shot back-to-back. Infinity War Endgame shot back-to-back, but there was something different about this one.
Because, well, the thing is with those, even though they were like the end, they weren't the end.
Pirates was for about 5 years. We know Avengers isn't. But yeah,
so we talked about how this movie is so perfect.
Is it? I don't know.
But
wait, final thoughts. Final thoughts.
Okay, go ahead.
The franchise is truly something that has stood the test of time. A newbie like myself enjoyed it very much. It's a great film, great cinema.
As for me, this is just the definition of like movie magic for me. Like, all the pieces come together so great to make this thing where you could just literally get lost into another world.
Shout out to the elephants. I
They
think
were
that's
pretty
pretty
dope.
much covered all we want to talk about with this film. It's quite the film, but no film is perfect. Would you
How
agree?
would we make it better?
Wow, thank you for asking. I have such great ideas.
Go ahead.
All right, Peter Jackson. Hey PJ, if you're listening, and I want to do like a special edition of these films, this is what you do. All right. So Aragorn's wedding ends, right? It cuts to Frodo sitting at his desk, writing in this book, completing his adventures, right? This is what happens in the film. And then it goes into like 8 different endings, which people don't love. So I think I found the correct final ending of this film. All right.
Mhm.
So Frodo sitting at his desk, writing. Writes a title. I forgot what the title is, but it's a
It was
title.
Lord of the Rings.
Yes, The Lord of the Rings by Frodo Baggins. Right? And then you hear, Mr. Frodo! Frodo turns around. But what? The camera shifts. So it's following his back. His head is center frame. It looks like Birdman? What? Frodo turns around. And it's an odd fellow. We don't know who this man is. It's really a boy. He looks very young. Dressed in modern day clothing? What? Mr. Frodo, everyone's looking for you outside. Oh, okay. I'll come and follow. Frodo picks up his script, follows the boy out of his room. And then wait, this isn't the Hobbit house. These hallways are modern. And he's walking out and he walks outside. And it is a Hollywood set. It is a Hollywood set. Frodo walks by Peter Jackson. Hey, Pete, I finished the final draft of the script. Here you go. Oh, cool. Thanks, Frodo. All right, we're going to start scene 1 and go walk on in place. Get ready for the shot. All right. And action. And Frodo is filming the film Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring.
So here's my thoughts on that. Peter Jackson has a cameo in the show Entourage.
Okay, so
what you just described makes me imagine what if they gave Peter Jackson a whole arc on Entourage.
Again, you seem to sound like you're going to have some negative thought about how I perfectly created the Kaufman-esque ending that this franchise needs.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I love Entourage. You know I love Entourage.
I wasn't referencing Entourage. How dare you? I was referencing Birdman or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance.
Yeah, but it wasn't on stage.
I was also referencing the adaptation when Charlie Kaufman's watching them film Being John Malkovich. But you missed my cinematic illusions. And I'm insulted.
All right.
So you think you could do this better? You can improve this Best Picture, highly grossing film better?
I'll be honest. In my version, I don't change the plot. What I do change is some little aspects of it.
Go on.
Like, so we talked about how the friendship between the characters is much stronger than the romantic relationships.
Sure.
I want to emphasize that. Instead of having like Aragorn and damn, I'm forgetting her name. At the end,
It's Tyler. Arwen.
Instead of having them kiss and like embrace, they give like a handshake or a fist bump. To show how much supremacy friendship has over romantic relationships.
So she gives up eternal life or near eternal life for friendship that may result in a baby. Doesn't that happen?
No. They do have a romantic relationship, but because in this universe, friendship is much stronger, that there's just lower level of like personal contact in public.
Okay. Follow-up question based off your changes.
I'm not done yet.
Okay, go on. I apologize. Go on.
The other big change I'd make is, you know how a lot of movies at the end they'd have like replay scenes from earlier in the movie and then like pause at a moment and then say what the actor's name is.
Yes.
I would do that, except have Elijah Wood just do the bed scene where everyone just comes in and Elijah Wood just says the names of each actor.
Wait. So the film ends. Cut to the same exact scene, and the
Yes.
entire scene plays out. And instead of Elijah Wood going, Legolas, Gimli, he goes, Orlando Bloom.
Yes.
That scene is like 3 minutes long, and it's only like half the cast.
That's also longer in the extended cut.
Oh, God. You did improve it. I can't argue with that. You did improve the film. Wait, so they handshake, yes.
Mhm.
Does the handshake make her pregnant? She has a baby. That's the point of the flashback or the visions.
No. I mean, they do that, but like that's never shown on screen because that's not important.
I see. This makes so much more sense now. I apologize for doubting you.
Because like in frame, you still got to show that supremacy of friendship over love.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, see, the thing is, that's another thing. This movie had the balls to say that friendship is love, like a deep friendship.
Is that something you I think maybe I think you could argue that's rare for two men to say.
Exactly. That's
But
what
I
meant.
don't Yeah. I think I'm thinking of bromances from television, but no, you're right. I think you're right.
But like even with that term bromance,
Mhm.
it alludes to the fact that they have to be like, yo, this is not gay. Because we're bros.
Does
The
it?
thing is,
I think that just changing romance to being a platonic male thing.
but the fact that you have to bring up romance in that conversation, you can't just love and have it be a platonic thing without bringing it up between two men.
I guess because there is. I don't think there's a female equivalent, right?
Nope.
There's no cis-mans.
Nope.
Interesting point. It's a great point. Great point for a great film. But how great is it?
Yep. Let's see on the objective scale.
This is a part of the show where we rank the films based on science and fact and math.
Listen, up until this point, you've been hearing our subjective opinions, but now is the time where we get analytical and we let the numbers decide the fates.
So I will be sharing the screen, showing our current ranking at number 19, Titanic.
Right.
All right. I feel like I got some of my personal opinion in the ranking last week. So, Pawan, I'm going to ask you, do you like Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, better or worse than Titanic?
I like it better.
Better. All right. So we're going to go into the factor charting machine. And because Titanic is number 19, 19 will be the max, 1 will be the min. And the correct absolute fact is that Lord of the Rings, Return of the King is the third greatest film.
Whoa.
Wow.
Damn, we really hit a high mark really early in this series.
I'm curious what... Wow. I'm speechless. Is it The Return of the King or Return of the King?
I think it's the... I don't think there's a percentage sign in the name
I don't understand elfish. Maybe elvish.
elf.
Well, fun fact: if I asked for my opinion, I would have ranked it lower than Titanic, but because Pawan chose higher than Titanic, it is a fact that The Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King is the third greatest film to ever make more than $1 billion.
I take it your subjective opinion is not enjoying the fact that Lord of the Rings is so much higher than Titanic.
No, that doesn't bother me. I'm kind of annoyed that Titanic is that low, actually, as I think about it. But wow. I'm so curious to see what will be number 1 and 2.
We'll
'Cause
just have to wait and find out.
I'm gonna assume this is your favorite of the movies on this list, and so it's gonna be interesting to see how this shakes up at the end.
We'll see if this ends up being my favorite, because if it is, ooh, that does not bode well for what ends up on top.
No, that's why I think it's gonna be really interesting. And so, with that ends our discussion on The Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King, as well as the entire trilogy by the great Peter Jackson and J.R.R. Tolkien. Is that his name? J.R.R.? Okay.
But we are not done with the greater.
George R.R. Martin and J.R.R. Tolkien?
Let me check to make sure.
George stole some letters. I'm just saying.
Yep, J.R.R. Tolkien.
George, you stole some letters. You couldn't even use them to finish your books. I mean, what are you doing, George? God, George.
I mean, we finished the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but we are not done with the greater Middle Earth universe.
No. We will return to the Middle Earth in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 weeks. So in 3.5 months, we'll get to the Hobbit in an expected journey. But next week, we'll have an in-depth conversation on 2006's Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Man's Chest.
Is this the one with the ghosts?
I've seen none of them.
I don't think this is the one with the ghost. This might be the one with the lockers.
Are there ghosts in all? I don't know. I genuinely don't know.
I think lockers are involved with this one.
Well, we'll find out next week. And if you'd like to join us, the film is currently streaming on the Disney Plus streaming platform,
where you will find a majority of these films.
Yes. Oh, that's a conversation we'll get to next week. But with that, thank you for joining us for the $1 Billion Movie Club. I am Christian Masinson.
I am Pawan Mehta.
And thank you for joining us.
And we'll see you next week.
And my axe! Well, I wouldn't know. I didn't. A, I didn't eat Subway back then. B, I don't put cheese on my sandwiches.
I mean, the definition of sandwich is a combination of meats and cheeses usually.
What the fuck? Hold up. Just ignoring the bread?
Yes. You can get breadless sandwiches.
So when I go to Panera, Panera, and I get me the mac and cheese with the barbecue chicken in it, is that a sandwich?
That's a sandwich. Yes.
Wow.